Hi everyone, I'm Ava and I'm an American living in the Netherlands. And today I want to talk to you about some very important things you need to know when moving to the Netherlands. Well, at least some of these things are important and these other things are just good to know or fun to know. So without further ado, let's get into them. Now, the first thing that you need to know when moving to the Netherlands is that no matter what people who don't live in the Netherlands tell you, those people who have come to visit Amsterdam or other parts, other big cities in the Netherlands, and then they go back and they tell you, oh my God, it's unbelievable. Everyone in the Netherlands just speaks English. Don't listen to them. What you need to know is that when you move to the Netherlands, you need to at least learn a little bit of Dutch. Now, before I go into all the reasons why learning a little bit of Dutch will come in handy, let us first talk quickly about our sponsor for today's video, italki. For those of you who don't know, italki is a platform you can use to practice a language by talking to advanced or native speakers of the language you're trying to learn. So if you're trying to learn Dutch, italki is a great place where you can connect with advanced or native speakers. And here's how it works. You can simply go onto the website and type in the language you want to learn, in this case Dutch, and then look through the teachers available and their hourly rates. What is nice about italki is that the teachers set their own pricing. So if you are working with a limited budget, this is great for you. Now for the record, I myself have used italki several years ago when I was learning Spanish. So italki has over 130 languages available, so you can definitely find the language you're looking to practice. And I'm a firm believer that one of the best ways in which you can learn a new language is by practicing with someone who speaks that language better than you. But you can't always find that person. With italki, you can. So that's where they come in. And these are personalized one-on-one lessons we're talking about. So you can actually tell the instructor or your conversation partner, what I like to call them, what you're looking to learn in that lesson. So you will progress rapidly. And here's the best part. If you sign up for italki, you get 3 trial lessons starting from €1. And it gets even better. If you type in the code Dutch, you will get $5 off when you spend 10. So go ahead, look at the description box down below and use the link to try out italki today. What better time to get started on your goal of getting better at a foreign language than right now? With italki, you can completely decide what you want to learn and when you want to learn it. You are in charge. So if you're interested in learning a foreign language or just want to get better at the one you already know, then go ahead to the description box down below and click on that italki link. And don't forget to look at the trial lessons on italki and to use the code Dutch to get your $5 discount. Okay, so as promised, let us get into why it'll be extremely helpful for you to learn a little bit of Dutch when you move to the Netherlands. Now, I myself, when back in the day I was a tourist and I would come to the Netherlands, most often to Amsterdam, I really thought, hey, learning Dutch is just a bonus. And then I actually moved here. So when you move here, you of course realize that learning Dutch, first of all, is great for making Dutch friends and learning more about Dutch culture because let me tell you, the Dutch folk are really proud of their language. I mean, they cannot get enough of those throat exercises, apparently. No, just kidding. Dutch is a really rich, wonderful language and it's really nice to learn something new. If you're gonna move somewhere, then it helps to get to know the culture and with that comes the language. But it's also very practical because in a lot of tourist areas, you'll see signs sometimes just in English. And then you think, well, what do I need Dutch for? When you go outside the tourist areas, you very much need Dutch. Let me give you an example of something that happened to me because yes, you can Google Translate everything, and at some point you totally get sick of Google translating everything. But there was one time I ran out of data, and I was waiting at a bus stop. I was going to see a friend. Of course, this was when I wasn't biking, so I was at the bus stop. And then I saw a word next to the bus I was supposed to take, and the word was vervalt. And vervalt isn't like a normal word outside of transportation context. At least I hadn't come across it before, even though I did know a little bit of Dutch. So I kind of didn't know what it meant. It means canceled. And I figured that out after waiting for like 15 minutes. But those are 15 minutes of my life I'm never getting back because I didn't know enough Dutch. You see what I mean? learning some Dutch will go a long way. And now that we've talked about the Dutch language, let us talk a little bit about Dutch people. Here's thing number 2 that you need to know, or it's nice to know when you move to the Netherlands. And that is that Dutch people are not shy on the street even, like in public places. So we always talk about how Dutch people are very direct. It's one of the first things that you will learn about Dutch culture, but it also means that in public places, they are not afraid to, let's say, make it very obvious what they're thinking by doing the following. So let's say like you're walking on the street and you have on a t-shirt that's like too bright. Dutch people will stare at you. You're maybe, let's say, having a conversation with a friend on the street and you're speaking a little too loudly, then Dutch people will stare at you also. Like, they're not afraid to stare. Americans, on the other hand, are very good at staring straight ahead. They'll pretend that nothing is happening, even though you know they're listening and they know they're listening and everyone knows they're listening, and it's just awkward when they just pretend nothing is going on. Dutch people will just stare at you. So it's like a different type of awkward where you're made aware that like, maybe I should keep my volume down and do normal. So they will stare at you when you're not doing normal, as they like to say. Also, a related point is that Dutch people like to comment and make their opinions known. Just take a look at the comments under this video or under any other video I've made. Just kidding, but also really. Anyway, point is, when you're on the street, you will also hear Dutch people comment. A very real life example that happened to me, I mentioned that when I first moved to the Netherlands, I didn't know how to bike properly. Now I know how to bike properly. What happened in between was I was learning how to bike in the Netherlands. Now, imagine learning how to bike in a country where everyone already knows how to bike and cannot imagine a world in which they just didn't know how to do that. It's like, you know how to breathe, you know how to walk, you know how to bike. Right? Not the case for me. But anyway, so I was, like all wobbly on my bike quite often, trying to like hop on and hop off, especially since I decided to get an Oma fiets with only back brakes. I know I'm crazy. I love a challenge. But basically, when I was practicing, Dutch people were not afraid to comment. First of all, they would stare, and then I'm like, okay, they're staring, whatever, no pressure. But then they would also just say things like, yep, get on the bike, go get on that bike. And they were being really nice, but I think being American, I was a little taken aback. So when you move to the Netherlands, you have been warned that this could happen, so you will not be taken aback and like fall off a bike if you're trying to learn. So that said, that was the part that took me aback a little, but this also translates to something really nice, which is that oftentimes when you walk on the street, maybe not so much in big cities like Amsterdam, probably not in Amsterdam, and not so much in Utrecht, but in other places, I've noticed that you walk on the street and if you come across a stranger and you're crossing paths, they will say hello if they're Dutch most often. I'm sure non-Dutch people also say hello, but I've really noticed that here. So that's kind of nice. I think it really brightens up my morning when people just say good morning. And I'm like, I'm a New Yorker. What is going on? I don't understand. But once I got used to it, I started looking forward to it. It's like, oh, nice. I'm going to have interactions with people on the street. So there are definitely, pros and cons to that. And it all depends on what you're used to. Okay, speaking of biking in the Netherlands, here's what you need to know about that. First of all, doesn't matter how good you think public transport is in the city or village or town that you live, you need to get a bike because biking is the most efficient way to get around where you live. I was one of those people who decided that it wasn't as necessary because initially I'd moved to Amsterdam and I was like, there are trams, there are metros, why would I need a bike? I mean, it's of course cheaper and better, but I couldn't bike properly. So that was my excuse. But metros aside, I know there was this one time that was a turning point for me when in Amsterdam, my girlfriend and I were heading to Central Station. Now, I couldn't bike, but she loves biking and she was not gonna hop on a tram with me. And we were going to Central Station, so we just decided we were gonna meet each other there. We left at the same time. Like I physically got on the tram the same moment she left that spot on her bike. And when we get to Central Station, I hop off the tram and she's standing there, she's parked her bike and everything, and she looks completely unfazed. Whereas I was like, how did you get here before me? How did you have time to park your bike? And it looks like you've been waiting a few minutes. And she was like, everybody knows that the bike is faster. I didn't know. I fully expected this machine-driven tram to beat her there, but apparently not. Her bike with no gears got there faster. So there's your first lesson about biking in the Netherlands. And lesson number 2, this is important, listen up. You do not want to get a fancy, shiny new bike. Doesn't matter where you are in the Netherlands. Yes, the chances of your bike getting stolen in a nice village is maybe less than in Amsterdam, but your bike will get stolen. And it's not just your bike getting stolen. Sometimes parts of your bike could get stolen. So just make sure you have like the most basic bike, used, secondhand, no gear, nothing fancy. Just get like a very old looking bike. If the stand of the bike is broken, like the seat's a bit ripped, great, perfect. Like it's gonna be less lucrative to the person who wants to steal it. And can I just quickly tell you a story about parts of your bike getting stolen? Because this took me by surprise. Like once I finally figured out how to bike properly and I was getting the hang of it, I biked somewhere, to a friend's, and then I parked my bike. And when I came back, this was like 1 a.m. Imagine my dismay when I found that the inner tube of my tire was stolen. Just one tube of one tire, not the whole tire, not both tubes, just that one thing, which meant that my tire was flat and I could not bike back home. So I had to carry my bike for 30 minutes at 1 a.m. in the morning. I would have preferred not to do that because honestly, that is more difficult than it sounds. But anyway, the point is get a simple bike. It might get stolen. Parts of your bikes might get stolen. I mean, generally, I'm not worried about things getting stolen in the Netherlands. Like I'm not worried about getting pickpocketed, for instance, but something about those bikes, they will just keep getting passed on from person to person who steals them. And then eventually your bike will probably end up at the bottom of a canal. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is when you move to the Netherlands, you have to get insurance. Now, I come from a little place called the United States of America where having insurance is like a big deal. If you have health insurance, that is a privilege. You do not take that for granted because America is the land of the free and the land of the people who went bankrupt because they couldn't pay their hospital bills. That is not something to make fun of. Like, it's an actual problem. That said, in America, if you have health insurance and car insurance, you're like rolling in insurance. But in the Netherlands, you find people with all kinds of insurances. And their insurances for things I didn't know you could get an insurance for. Like, yes, I expected the health insurance, sure, car insurance. If you rent an apartment, okay, people have renter's insurance, and I'm already thinking that's a lot of insurance. But there's also insurance for like when you spill red wine on someone's white carpet. That's called aansprakelijkheidsverzekering, if I'm not mistaken. That's also a mouthful, first of all. But I didn't know that was a thing. And people kept telling me, wait, you don't have aansprakelijkheidsverzekering? I mean, what are you gonna do when you spill red wine on someone's white carpet? I love how in the Netherlands, people just like to wear shoes indoors. So getting muddy shoes on your white carpet, no problem. But apparently if you spill red wine on it, then you can get insurance for that. I mean, okay, generally speaking, just for factual purposes, this is insurance for when you cause damage to someone else's property. But again, not something I knew you could get insurance for. There are also other kinds of insurances that many people just have here, like life insurance, funeral insurance. If you buy a house together with your partner, then you get insurance for when one of you is no longer on this earth. So there's all kinds of insurances, and you will definitely see that Dutch people just have like 4 or 5 insurances each. The next item on the list is Dutch weather. Now, I cannot make a list about preparing yourself to move to the Netherlands without telling you about Dutch weather. So yes, you may have heard that it is rainy and windy, like it rains here all the time, but actually it's a little more complicated than that because it could rain every day, let's say for a week, but the total amount of time it could have rained that week is, let's say, maybe 2 hours. So basically what I mean by that is that it could rain any moment, and you could have a really beautiful sunny day like you see out here today, but in an hour, it could be the apocalypse and it could be just pouring buckets. So you never know what to expect. So you have to prepare yourself for the possibility of when it could rain, because it rains often. It doesn't rain very long, I've found most often, but it rains frequently. So how do you prepare yourself for that? Well, there's an app for it, like there is an app for everything these days. But the Dutch apps are pretty good. I like Bouwradar, that's the one I recommend. And thing number 2, also very important, is get a rain jacket, or even better, get a rain suit. I don't have a rain suit myself, but I have a rain jacket. And the first video I made actually about Dutch weather, which was now about a year ago, in that video, I showed a rain jacket and I said, this isn't mine, it's my girlfriend's. But since then, I have wised up and gotten my own rain jacket because I realized you cannot live here without a rain jacket. I mean, maybe you could, but it's just way more comfortable to have one. Why is that? Because first of all, at that time I had an umbrella and I had decided to get like a cute little portable umbrella that I could bring with me everywhere so that if it rained suddenly, I would just pull it out and use it. I thought about the rain, but forgot about the wind. So I lost 2 umbrellas to the wind. And at that point, I just decided, you know what? I'm just gonna have a rain jacket that if I know it's gonna rain because I've checked my app and the app says it's gonna rain, I bring my rain jacket, especially when it's a bit cold, it's perfect. So don't wait too long to get a rain jacket. Moving on to the final thing on the list, and that is how sometimes in the Netherlands, you will hear unexpectedly loud noises. Now, generally speaking, the Netherlands is a quiet, calm country. Like on a regular basis, you will hear people chatting and stuff, but you won't hear things like really loud market vendors, even when you go to the marketplace. Like it'll be loud because people are talking, but it's not jarring in any way. So I personally, given what I'm used to, have found that the Netherlands is a calm, quiet country. Except, and these exceptions are very loud exceptions. They're exceptions on the first Monday of the month, and there are exceptions on the days leading up to New Year's Eve and on New Year's Eve. And let me explain these exceptions, because the first Monday of the month, you may not walk around thinking, hey, today is the first Monday of the month. You may also not be aware of the speciality of the first Monday of the month when you first moved to the Netherlands. I certainly wasn't, even though I had a Dutch partner who could have told me things. But there I was on a seemingly innocuous first Monday of the month, blah, 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 typing away at work, and then I hear alarm sounds, like really, really loud alarm sounds through the city. And then I get a text from my girlfriend saying, oh, by the way, that's a thing that happens here. You need to know that alarms go off throughout the country on the first Monday of the month at 12 p.m. Why? I mean, there's a very good reason why, so I shouldn't say why. But at the moment, I definitely was like, why? What is happening? Are we all going to die? Because it really sounds like that type of alarm. And that's exactly what it's meant for. So they test out the alarms throughout the country on the first Monday of the month. And you will hear that. And when you move here, you will not be used to it and it will scare you. It struck my very core. And let us now talk about the very special category of New Year's Eve in the Netherlands, because it is a war zone on New Year's Eve. There are fireworks everywhere because the Dutch aren't really allowed to use fireworks throughout the year, and so they let loose on New Year's Eve. I have never seen anything like it. It's crazy. Usually I like to enjoy organized fireworks on New Year's Eve. But here on New Year's Eve, you will see people like bursting things and lighting things up, blowing things up all over the place. And okay, maybe you can learn to expect it on New Year's Eve, but what you don't know is that the days leading up to it, you will also just hear random things exploding or going off in the middle of the night or during the day, and you have no idea what's happening. And I'm from America, so my first thought was, is somebody getting shot? No, nobody's getting shot. It's just people letting fireworks loose. And finally, I mentioned that Dutch people tend to be pretty calm on a regular basis, but sometimes Dutch people are not that calm, other than the loud instances I just mentioned, and that is when the Dutch are playing in a football game of any kind. In that case, if you are not a Dutch football fan, or if you're not a football fan, just run away and hide. Because Dutch people get very, very excited when the Netherlands or a Dutch team is playing football. They just get so excited. So if you're on a train and you see a storm of people coming in with like Dutch flags on, or they're just screaming and shouting, there was a Dutch game on. That's what was happening. I was very surprised to see that, because normally when I ride the train, people are mostly quiet, just having conversations and everything is nice. And then on the evenings where you just see people storming in, screaming, yelling, like slamming on windows, you wonder what got into everybody. it's the games. They cannot control themselves when they watch a football game. And that's okay. But it is very surprising because in America, people just like to get all decked out in gear and then they go, woo! And that's about it. So when you move to the Netherlands, you need to be aware of the football madness and love that runs through this country. Anyway, so those were a few things I wanted to share with you about what you should know when you move to the Netherlands. As usual, if you have any comments, I would love to read them down below. Until next time.